I pulled up the warden's chair, as he had stepped out for a breather anyway. As my very, very accusatory stare was currently aimed at Asim, he was the one who answered me. "No, the app gave a warning right away, but Omar was in hospital, you see, and he had lost his phone. He was injured very badly in the explosion. His retina detached. He had a piece of rebar in his foot and, conclusion." "Concussion," said Omar. "Yes, a serious concussion. I was in hospital for 2 days. I was in prison for 4. You didn't think to send the kafama to get me, or Asim?" "Actually, it was the kafama who just told me where you were. He also has the app with my account. Just as well, or we would—" I held up my hand. "Hang on. The kafama wasn't even with you at the mosque, so he didn't lose his phone, did he? Didn't he get notified straight away?" Omar shrugged. "Yes, I imagine so. But he was worried about me. The entire country was in disarray, Carstairs. Terrorists killed hundreds of people and several very senior government officials. You saw the devastation, didn't you? We have begun 3 days of national mourning." I just nodded. It had been terrible. I had only intended to roast a few dozen worshippers alive by dousing them in ethyl alcohol, but that had caused a stampede, which in turn had set off explosives elsewhere in the building. Half a city block had been blown up. And somehow I couldn't shake the notion, however misplaced, I had something to do with that. Butterfly effect and all that. A butterfly flaps its wings, and 5,000 miles away I use a mosque's fire suppression system to commit mass murder, and then somehow in the same building a bomb goes off. That's serendipity for you. I knew it was silly to beat myself up over it, but I'm just a very empathetic person by nature. "Right," I said, after mulling it over. "So I'm free to go?" "Yes, of course," said Asim. "You're an innocent man." "Good. Can you drop me off at the airport?" Omar sat up. "Airport?" "Yes, it's where all the planes are, and I'd appreciate it if you could walk me to the gate, Asim." "But you are not going anywhere, Carstairs. Alexandra has missed 4 days of lessons, and you have a few more months to go. You can come to the palace with us. By the way, where have you been all this time? I mean, before you apparently felt the need to book a flight without my permission." Time for some creative lying. I had actually been in my more or less secret garage, torturing Imam Musa. Then, after I'd disposed of his body, I had a haircut and was hoping to get to London. They'd never see me here again. "Yes, Reginald. The last time we saw you was when you and I had carried Omar out of the mosque. You remember the cloud of dust when the minaret fell?" "I do, vividly. I'm still coughing up concrete." "Well, that's when we lost you. We were in an ambulance when we suddenly noticed you weren't with us. Omar said you'd probably gone home, but the kafama told us you never came back to the palace. Where were you?" Time for some of that acting I've had an award for. I've been thinking about that, and honestly, I can't remember. I know I saw you flag down an ambulance, and there was a man trapped in the rubble, screaming. I spoke to him for a while until 2 firemen came to help him. And I remember I was caked in dust, just entirely grey. Someone gave me a bottle of water to wash my face. My mouth was full of cement after that, and my nose. Omar and Asim nodded. It had been the same for them. The minaret of the mosque had somehow survived the initial explosion, but when the main building had simply vanished, it had lacked any kind of structural support and collapsed just after Asim and I had rescued Omar from the toilet. I was parked in a side street because there was no parking space near the mosque, it being a Friday. I made it to my car and I just drove. I don't remember where. Must have been a menace on the road. But eventually I came to my senses. I called you, Asim. There was no answer. And I called you, Uranus, but I didn't know anybody else. I have no friends here, no family. I just wanted to be home, in London, in the rain, and visit my sister. So I got the first flight out of here. They only had business class tickets left, bloody expensive. I told this sad tale mostly to the marble floor. Asim leaned forward and briefly put his hand on my shoulder. Omar, entirely unmoved by my woeful tale, simply asked, "And you just left your car behind, that Aston Martin car of yours?" "It's in storage. I took a cab to the airport." Omar grunted. "Storage? Doesn't sound like the actions of a man who doesn't know what he's doing. You and I have a deal, Carstairs. You teach the princess until she graduates. Can't do that from London." He had me there. Well, nearly. "Sir, my car is in storage because I did that before I went to the coffee shop. I just drive it around from time to get some miles on it. I locked it up, felt like a bit of cheesecake, and used the palace car to get to the mall. And then there was a terrorist attack. I remember diving to the ground with Omar and that Belgian chap. What's his name?" "Martin," said Asim, who is exactly the sort of person who remembers someone's name after having met them only once. Omar harumphed. "Tsk, I was a lot closer to that attack, Carstairs, and I'm not going anywhere either." I gave him my saddest, most disappointed look. "You live here. Your family is here. I have nobody. Well, one friend." I nodded at Asim, who seemed very pleased I acknowledged our friendship. He'd have been less pleased if he knew I'd have fried him like a catfish in the attack, even when I knew he'd be inside the mosque. I was very glad he stepped out at the last minute, but I'd have gone through with it either way. But now I was busy improvising a speech, or rather a lamentation. The person I speak to the most is forced to hide behind a curtain, a prisoner in her own house. Not even my chambermaid is allowed to talk to me. I take my meals alone, and if I want to eat something I actually like, I have to cook it myself in Asim's house. There's nothing to do here. Can't even take a stroll through the gardens without inadvertently chasing off some Malaysian housemaids. I live in a palace, but I can't even use the pool to stay in shape, or get in shape, whatever. I miss my sister and my cousins. I miss my brother, and after 4 years, I still miss. I've had to cry for 2 scenes in Fatherland, and it was a weird but very interesting experience. Emma told me how to do it. And I was going to fake it, just because I felt like hammering home the point of how absolutely fucking miserable this country was. But it came a bit too easy. I did miss my sister, and I did miss the others. And I'd been in prison for 4 days, not sure if I'd be there for another month or another decade. Actually, I was pretty sure I wouldn't be there for a decade, which raised the spectre of having to plan my suicide. That's a real downer, let me tell you. And I'm sorry, it's just 2 tears trickled down my face and dripped on the cold floor. I had buried my head in my hands. Asim got up and kneeled down next to me, awkwardly offering me a hug. "It's okay, Carstairs. It's okay. It will be fine. I will talk to Omar. Maybe you can invite your family here, show them our country. We can make it a special experience for them, a nice vacation. We'll send a private jet and—" "It's not about his family, Asim," said Omar. "He was talking about his wife, weren't you?" "Yes." "Well, we can't bring his dead wife over here." Asim immediately turned to his cousin. "Brother," he said in Arabic. Yeah, they call each other brother in Arabic and cousin in English. Look, I don't know, okay? I just work here. Don't be so disrespectful to this man. Oh, yes, okay, I'm sorry. I was thinking out loud. My apologies, Carstairs. Anyway, we're here now. You're free to go, as long as you come with us, that is. He got up and clearly intended for us to follow him. Sorry, I have an outstanding debt. I need to pop back in for just a second. I always pay my debts, you see. What debt? You mean you want to go back in there? Just for a minute, sir. Can you walk me to my cell? A slightly perplexed guard nodded. Can I come? Asked Asim. I'm curious. Sure. Doesn't take much to end up there, but you can come. And so the three of us walked back to the cells, while I divided my money into 3 parts. A scene was uncharacteristically quiet as I walked down the corridor and turned into the cell block. I collected some things and shook hands with the Chewich, whose real name I still don't know. Meanwhile, the guard stayed near the door and aimed his gun at the nearest inmates, who didn't seem impressed in the slightest. "Thank you for giving me some credit upon my arrival. Here's a token of my appreciation. I do hope you'll extend the next person who ends up here a helping hand as well." "Oh, okay." He pocketed the banknotes I gave him. I gave most of the rest to the poorest Pakistani fellow in the room, a nearly toothless wretch who was flabbergasted and would have started to kiss my shoes if I hadn't stopped him. Then I picked up a small bag with some clothes, most of them in dire need of a wash, and asked to speak to the guy who had given me the Ludlam book. I gave it back to him and made sure he saw the banknotes I had stuck between the pages while I was packing my belongings. He noticed and smiled. "Good luck you," he said, thereby exhausting his entire English vocabulary. "And to you, my friend. What's your name?" "Kapoor." "Kapoor. Thank you." I turned to Wasim. "Ready, Your Royal Highness." Yeah, okay, we go. Bye, everyone. May Allah be merciful on all of you." Even though it had only been 4 days, though that really was more than enough for me, Asim now treated me as if I'd spent 20 years on Rikers Island hacking rocks into gravel. He admitted he thought I'd been kept in something not unlike a Red Roof Inn motel room. All through the ride home he kept asking me questions about the food and the sanitation, how I managed to sleep, and all those other questions I myself would have asked only a few days ago. "And how did you get money?" "I had some cash left, which they returned to me after a few days, which is a good thing because without money you can't get anything there. But it was running out, so I—" "Nonsense," said Omar, who had been pretending to read the news on his phone. "We are a civilized country. Prisoners don't need to pay for their own bed." "Cousin, you should have come with us. It was awful. The smell, and so many people, and the guards, they just aim a gun at them all the time." "I assure you I'd have had to sleep on a bare steel frame if I hadn't had any money. And there are people in there in dire need of medication. 2 of them were diabetics. One had already lost his eyesight during his incarceration. Another man had a hernia. He was in constant pain." "Well, then, they shouldn't have sinned." "Really? Then what's civilized about it? The punishment is incarceration, not going blind. And remember, none of these men had actually seen a judge. They had merely been accused of something and arrested. Their guilt had not yet been ascertained by a court of law." Omar made a dismissive gesture. "Enough, Carstairs. We are here. When you have taken a shower and had a meal and perhaps a stroll in the gardens, I'm sure you will forget all about it. We will talk more tomorrow. Driver, let me out at the main palace. I have an audience with His Majesty. Asim, make sure Mr. Carstairs is comfortable and maybe check for any, He mimed a bug by wriggling his fingers and got out of the car. "Maybe have the car sprayed, or anyway, I have to go," he said before he closed the door.
You have been listening to Chapter 1 of The Protocols of Carstairs by Ron Dudderie, the final part of a 3-book story within the Carstairs series. To purchase this story or any other books as ebooks, please visit funnyandsexyebooks.com. This audio file may be shared anywhere and in any way you like, provided this disclaimer remains attached and the file was not sold. For more information, visit funnyandsexyebooks.com.